Welcome to the Bare Metal Cyber CISO Prepcast. This series helps you prepare for the exam with focused explanations and practical context. Welcome to the Bare Metal Cyber CISO Prepcast. This series helps you prepare for the exam with focused explanations and practical context. Chief Information Security Officers carry significant legal accountability in the event of security incidents. At the executive level, the CISO must understand how liability can extend beyond operational failures to include governance decisions, control gaps, and even lack of oversight. When a breach occurs, questions of legal responsibility are often directed toward the CISO's office. The CISO typically serves as the control owner for legal compliance across multiple security domains. This includes ensuring that required policies exist, that controls are operational, and that security decisions are documented appropriately. Coordinating with legal counsel becomes essential during breach response, investigations, and mandatory reporting. In such events, the CISO helps gather facts, interpret incident scope, and ensure timely communication aligned with legal expectations. Executives must also demonstrate due care and due diligence, two foundational legal principles, through documented security strategies and oversight. In high-stakes cases, the CSIS may be called to provide executive testimony or regulatory support. This underscores the importance of having defensible documentation and clearly defined responsibilities in all aspects of the security program. Security leaders must have a firm grasp of foundational legal concepts. Due diligence refers to proactive efforts made to identify risks and reduce the likelihood of legal violations. It includes performing vendor assessments, implementing relevant controls, and staying current with regulatory changes. Due care is the baseline standard of care expected under the law. It represents the level of security effort that a reasonable organization would apply. When due care is not met, the concept of negligence comes into play. Negligence is the failure to act according to expected standards, which can lead to legal claims if harm occurs as a result. Other important legal concepts include burden of proof and chain of custody, which are particularly relevant in investigations and courtroom settings. If a breach results in litigation, the organization may need to prove that certain controls were in place or that data was not manipulated. The legal defensibility of the organization's controls, policies, and documentation often determines the outcome of disputes or regulatory reviews. CISOs must be fluent in understanding and applying specific regulatory obligations. One of the most widely applicable laws is the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR. This European Union regulation governs personal data processing and requires breach notification within 72 hours under certain conditions. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA, applies to healthcare organizations and mandates security standards for the protection of health information. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act, or SOX, applies to publicly traded companies and focuses on the integrity of financial reporting systems. It often involves controls over change management and access to systems that process financial data. The Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, or GLBA, is relevant in the financial sector and focuses on protecting consumer financial information. The Federal Information Security Management Act, or FISMA, mandates that federal agencies and some contractors maintain a baseline of cybersecurity controls to safeguard sensitive systems. Understanding how each of these regulations applies to the organization is a key executive responsibility. Security policies are often driven by legal and regulatory requirements. Policies around acceptable use, access control, data classification, and encryption must be crafted with legal obligations in mind. This ensures that if an incident occurs, the organization can show that policies were in place and aligned with governing laws. Retention and disposal of data also carry legal implications. Legal teams should review data handling procedures to ensure compliance with privacy laws and records management statutes. Encryption requirements may also be dictated by law, particularly in financial and healthcare sectors. Enforcement of these policies must align with employment law and human resources practices. For example, disciplinary actions for policy violations must follow fair labor standards and organizational conduct rules. Governance processes should include mechanisms to escalate legal violations or concerns. These may include whistleblower protections, compliance hotlines, or formal incident response procedures that involve legal counsel. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other podcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. When a data breach occurs, notification and legal reporting requirements become immediate priorities. The CISO must help determine the scope of the incident, the types of data involved, and the jurisdictions affected. Notification timelines vary by region, but some are extremely tight. For example, GDPR mandates notification to supervisory authorities within 72 hours for certain breaches. In the United States, different states have different timelines and thresholds. The CISO must coordinate with legal teams to determine when and how external disclosures should be made. Making premature or inaccurate disclosures can increase liability. Pre-established breach logs, incident documentation, and notification templates help streamline the process. Failure to notify regulators, affected individuals, or contractual partners in a timely and appropriate manner can result in substantial fines, lawsuits, or even criminal liability. This makes breach response not just a technical process, but a legal one, requiring close coordination between the security and legal functions. Legal considerations also extend into the management of third-party and vendor risk. Contracts with vendors and service providers must include clauses that define security obligations, establish audit rights, and spell out breach notification requirements. These terms are not merely suggestions, they are legally binding. Shared liability and data transfer conditions must be negotiated clearly and documented. If a vendor handles sensitive data on behalf of the organization, the CISO must ensure that appropriate certifications are in place. For example, SOC 2 Type 2 reports or ISO 27001 certifications are commonly used to demonstrate compliance. However, the CISO must also verify whether these certifications are sufficient from a legal standpoint. This requires collaboration with legal and procurement teams during vendor onboarding. Data privacy reviews must also be conducted to ensure that vendors meet regulatory requirements. This is especially critical in sectors such as healthcare or financial services, where third-party breaches can result in liability for the hiring organization. The relationship between privacy and security continues to evolve under the law. While security ensures that data is protected from unauthorized access or alteration, privacy is focused on the lawful use of that data. CISOs must ensure that security controls support privacy rights, such as consent, lawful processing, and the right to access or delete personal data. Privacy impact assessments and data protection impact assessments may be required before launching new systems or data processing activities. These assessments help identify risks to personal privacy and demonstrate regulatory compliance. Data minimization is another key principle. Organizations must only collect the data they truly need. Retention policies must reflect legal time frames, and anonymization must be handled correctly to preserve privacy while still supporting business analytics. The CSIO must work closely with the data protection officer and compliance leads to ensure these efforts are aligned. International and cross-border data handling adds additional legal complexity. Many countries have data residency laws that restrict the movement of personal data across national borders. Cloud deployments, for instance, must account for where data is stored, processed, and backed up. Standard contractual clauses, or SCCs, and binding corporate rules, or BCRs, are legal mechanisms that allow for international data transfers under specific conditions. The CSIO must verify that technical and organizational controls support these agreements. This may involve encryption, access restrictions, or physical separation of data environments. In global organizations, enforcement can become complicated due to overlapping jurisdictions and inconsistent regulatory requirements. The CSO must coordinate with international legal counsel to ensure that security architecture and operational processes remain compliant in every jurisdiction where the organization operates. Maintaining legal readiness means being prepared to respond to audits, investigations, and litigation. The organization must be able to show that its controls were working and that decisions were made with reasonable care. This requires maintaining evidence of control effectiveness, including audit trails, metrics, and policy enforcement records. Logs must be retained according to applicable laws and be available for legal review. Reports and risk assessments should be stored securely and updated regularly. Governance, risk, and compliance tools can support this effort by providing centralized tracking of compliance status, control coverage, and documentation. In the event of legal action, the organization may face discovery requests or litigation holds requiring certain records to be preserved and reviewed. Preparing for these scenarios in advance helps reduce disruption and support stronger legal defenses. On the CISO exam, candidates are expected to demonstrate an understanding of the legal and regulatory requirements that affect the CISO role. This includes being able to define and apply terms such as due care, breach notification, liability, and regulatory scope. Exam questions may present scenarios involving policy violations, audit failures, or third-party contract terms. Candidates must recognize where legal responsibilities lie and determine the appropriate course of action. The exam also emphasizes the role of the CISO in legal coordination. Whether it's handling a data breach or advising the board on compliance exposure, legal thinking is essential. Understanding how legal considerations intersect with risk, audit, and compliance efforts helps candidates approach exam questions strategically. Mastery of this topic shows that the candidate is prepared not only to pass the exam, but to lead effectively in a complex regulatory environment. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Bare Metal Cyber CC podcast. For more episodes, tools, and study support, visit us at baremetalcyber.com.